Welcome to the Mylance podcast. I'm Bradley Jacobs, your founder and CEO of Mylance. Today we have on the podcast Julie Crabill. Julie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Bradley. I'm excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. Same here. So give our guests a quick overview on who you are, what you built in the past, and where you're at today.
Yeah, so I'm a 20 plus year marketing professional. My background in the early days was on the communication side. Now I'm a fractional CMO or chief marketing officer, and I'm also a board member and advisor for startups and nonprofits that I care about.
Amazing. And so give us a little bit more detail. So you started a fractional CMO business, and then that turned into an agency. Give us how this even started. Like, did you leave your job and then, yeah, tell us that
Yeah,
story.
yeah. So I guess it was 15 years of working for other people in communications agencies, working my way up, all in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And then my job really drastically changed, during one of I think it was 2008 downturns or something around that time. And I jumped ship and thought, maybe I'll start my own thing. I'll do some consulting. And it was sort of general marketing consulting. And then that sort of led to, oh, you need a subcontractor, you need a sub freelancer for this or that. And, before I knew it, it was a small team of five working out of my living room. And then we got an office space. And ultimately, over I guess a 10-year period, it grew that agency. It was called Inner Circle Labs, south of Market in San Francisco, and our focus ran the gamut. We were really about passion projects. I believe that marketers and communications people who don't really love what they're working on, I would love if everybody worked where they loved what was happening and what was being built. But in particular, if those people who are that front face of the company, salespeople and marketing people, aren't super passionate about it, then there's probably a bigger issue and they're not the right fit. So that was our original focus. And over time, it became clear that the team was really into what I like to call frontier technology. So AI, machine learning, robotics, always keeping a little bit of consumer tech in there and whatever was hot with what people cared about. And then I wanted to make a change, and I had a CMO opportunity for a startup in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So sold that business and went and moved to New Mexico and changed my life and did, have since done two CMO gigs, one with that first company that was B2B SaaS with a very heavy AI and ML focus, data analytics on the entire planet. And then the second with a consumer media technology for kids. So very, very different, but both things that I was really passionate about and really excited about. And then after those two gigs was when I started doing board and advising work and realized that there were some companies I was working with who really needed truly a board member and advisor, and others who, once I got into sort of that board role with them, clearly needed more of a fractional executive presence. So that's what led me to spin up working as a fractional CMO. And I've been doing that for, I guess, 2 to 3 years now.
Amazing. I mean, what a journey through the different ways of working and different companies and agencies, selling the agency.
Yeah, and LinkedIn will keep me honest on the timeline, Bradley. With COVID, I don't think any of us know how many years have passed anymore on
Totally
anything.
fine. Totally fine. Give us an idea. A lot of our users are in those first few months, or even the first year of their fractional business. How did you get clients when you were just starting out? Those first two, three, four, five clients, what did that look like?
Yeah, for me, it was all existing relationships and being able to tap into my network. So it was just putting out the word that this is what I was working on, people sending me information or leads and saying, hey, I heard of this. I was talking to this company the other day. They might need you. So, sort of in that way, a little bit Mylancy, but instead of using artificial intelligence and ML, I was just using sort of the crowd of people I knew, all the way to people saying, I'm already working with these people on another thing, and I think they need a fractional CMO. Will you talk to them? Or investors connecting me with the companies that they were working with, and then people I had worked with in the past at Inner Circle Labs and prior to that.
And when you say you put the word out there, what does that mean?
I mean, for me, it ran the gamut from, the obvious, like a LinkedIn and a Facebook post, but also just getting out there more and having conversations and meetings with people. Going to places like in New Mexico, there's the Los Alamos National Labs. They have a program called LEAP that's a lab embedded entrepreneur program. So going there and saying, hey, I'm willing to come in and do, an hour session with anybody you want me to, or a 2-hour group session to talk about marketing. So a little bit of sort of that free consulting strategically within those venues where there might be a lot of entrepreneurs who are starting businesses. For me, I really love the hard stuff, right? I love the seed to kind of Series A phases of a business. So going to places where I know those types of people would be, and either speaking or doing those free consulting sessions was even more impactful than just letting people know on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yeah, it's like getting out there, having those conversations, telling people what you're up to, asking questions about their business.
Totally. And being super honest about what makes sense for them. I think one thing that I can say is, being a fractional executive, I think if you are too hungry, if you don't have a padding in terms of your financial situation, that you could maybe have a down month or a couple of down months, it's the same thing as starting an agency. You can't expect to go into it and have everything fall immediately into place. Sometimes it does, and sometimes you get exactly the amount of business you want. But I think if you're in a position where you're too hungry and desperate for business, that comes across, and you will sell into leads that maybe you shouldn't. That maybe the better advice would be, actually, you don't need me right now. Do these 5 things, and maybe we should talk again in 6 months. Or, you think you need me, but really you need this friend of mine who's a fractional CRO who actually could help you more right now. And I think doing that and being in that position for myself, I have been able to have better conversations that have led to more leads coming in because people appreciate the honesty. They refer their friends, and they come back to you later. So I guess that my advice would be ready. Give yourself a cushion so you're not in that too desperate of a sales mode.
You're the second guest in a row to emphasize that point of that integrity when it comes to, hey, maybe it's just not a fit right now, or in general, whatever it is. And then that actually helps you, multiples over, right? Down the line.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. And it feels better, right? Like, I think we can all look back in our careers at a time where maybe we oversold what should happen for a company, whether it was in an agency we worked in or in a sales environment, and how difficult and painful and full of regret that entire process makes you. So keeping yourself out of that position is also just good for your mental health and well-being, I guess. You get to work on better things.
Yeah, you're aligned internally in your message, and it feels good. You told me that you accidentally built an agency originally. Use those words. Tell us what happened there, and I'm also curious as part of that, like where these clients were continuing to come from.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at the very beginning it was accidental, and then it had to get super intentional super quickly. And at that point, I'll tell you more about bringing in people to help with that. But yeah, I think it just was clients that were part of that network of people that I'd worked with over that 10 or 15 years of agency life. Having the conversation of like, I've left my company and I'm kind of out on my own, and people saying, oh, I could use you for this, or I could use you for that. And as that got busier and busier, it was like, oh, I need somebody to help me with this element of the business. So I'll bring in this subcontractor. And then, oh, I need somebody to help me with operations. So I'll bring in a part-time sort of operations and finance and billing help. And then, oh, I need another person. And suddenly it's 5 people. And I turned to the ops person and said, I think I need to make this a business. And we partnered on making it a business and figuring out how to make everybody who was a contractor an employee. Luckily for us, everybody who was in that role really wanted that and wanted to make sure that they were, they wanted to stop the other things they were doing and come on board for the ride. And then we went from there and grew. I think, to your question, we grew very much through, smart relationship building. So that integrity of never taking on accounts that you didn't think you could be successful on, and being out there hosting events. We hosted a lot of events at the agency where we would have people in, and really have a good time with people so that they could see that not only were we going to be good at what we did, which was a really critical part of it, we had to continue to be good and push ourselves, but also we were going to be fun people to hang out with. Like, you don't want to spend so much time with a person if they're just a wet blanket and you're not going to have any fun while you do it. So for us, it was really those prongs and just uh, very much working in almost, this was before people were using the term fractional very much, but very much working in almost that fractional role within the company because the companies we worked with were so early stage. I, as the head of the agency, was often kind of looked at in the same way that I'm looked at now as a fractional CMO. And that my team members were really looked at as sort of the marketing team. It was the only marketing team they had in many cases. And sometimes that would be the entirety of their marketing from the creation of the company through an acquisition.
There's a lot of fractionals that are thinking about, okay, what does this turn into, right? Maybe I'm making 20 or 30K a month on my own, and then I can't scale myself, like unless I build a product, right? So it's either an agency or I just optimize my time, or there's only so many options. What advice would you give to a person in those shoes deciding whether should they bring on some people and build a small agency, or what would you say?
I mean, I think I don't want to burst anyone's bubble because I think part of what made our agency successful is that we didn't know how hard it was going to be when we walked into it. We didn't really know how intense it was going to be, how what kind of emotions get wrapped up in having employees and turnover and all of the different varied elements of that. And feeling that responsibility for other people's salaries, I think, is a really big thing versus just feeling it for yourself and maybe your family, right? Obviously. But you've got all these other people and their growing families to think about when you have that happen. So if you can walk in with sort of that rose colored glasses, I think it can be really great for people. It was certainly for me one of the best experiences of my life. And I'm so glad I did it. I don't ever want to replicate it because it was just perfect. We had such a great team. We had so much fun and we kicked so much ass. But I do think that are a lot of there are a lot of just sort of operational overhead types of things that you can't possibly know about until you're in those trenches. And I think the number one piece of advice I'd have for any fractional exec would be think about, if you really want to scale something, think about all of those elements that are going to come into it. Talk to people who have run agencies before, if that's the path you're going down. Ask them for the true nitty gritty of like, how hard was it? Think about the stage of your life that you're in. Like, do you want to start that? I've talked to people who are like, I think I'm going to start an agency and sell it in 5 years. It's not, I mean, really, you might start an agency and be able to start the acquisition process quickly, but if you want to maximize your acquisition, you're probably talking about a 3 to 5 year buyout on the end of that, right? So if the 5 year point, if you start selling, you're probably not out of the business until the 10 to 12 year point, right? So I think thinking about your timeline and what you want for your life and when do you want to be into that like grind, just work a ton, be flying around and having meetings and not know which hotel room you're sleeping in each night versus family and a little bit more peace and stability, time for wellness and working out. Like that's one thing I've loved as a fractional CMO is for the first time in the last 20 years, I'm really taking care of my health and eating right and being able to take the time to cook for myself and do walks and take swims, the stuff you and I have talked about. So I just think thinking through all of those elements, and if you do decide to proceed, make sure you sit and write down all of the things that you are not good at and that you do not want to do. And then your first hire or your business partner or partners should be people that can do those things because there is no faster way to tank a successful fractional or consulting business than to suddenly have to take on all this stuff that you're not only not good at, but you hate doing.
So much there we could go into. You
Yeah.
you talked about a niche around AI and machine learning, and you also talked about passion, which I think is something everybody wants to do, right? The perfect world would be I get to work on what I'm passionate about, and I'm also really freaking good at it, and I'm killing it. How did you marry those two? How did you choose those verticals? How did you think about that balance?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, I think we talked a lot about sort of I want to work on this account. Like there was a sense for me that I wanted to replicate some of the agencies I had worked in where you were just assigned to accounts, but I wanted to replicate that water cooler conversation where people would be in the kitchen and they would be like, "Oh, I've got to do this extra thing. I just love these guys. They're my baby. They're my favorite." And I thought, what if the entire agency was built on those favorites? So sometimes the passion was I really like the entrepreneur and the way they're talking about their business, and I like their vision, and maybe their product's not perfectly my thing, but I just really want to work with them. Or I love this product, or I love this space, or who they're selling into. And when it came to AI and machine learning, I think for us, it was ultimately the company that I went to work for, which was Descartes Labs, that was a big opener into that. Robotics was something different, but with Descartes, it was being able to see AI and machine learning actually have an impact on people's lives. So wildfire prevention, figuring out where power lines were potentially going to get hit by trees, bringing aid into emergency situations. So those things I think really made all of us start to have the conversation of this new and growing area of AI, while it was really, really young at the time, had such a potential to change the trajectory of humanity and actually really help people. Obviously, we've now all seen that it also could potentially have some issues we all have to look out for. There's some bigger things to look at there. But I think we were all really excited by that. And on the robotics front, another one that we really spent a lot of time on. I've always just been a fan of robots as sort of imagery, and I have a lot of art in my home that's robots and things like that, that it kind of predated any of this. But we started to work with some really cool robotics companies, Anybot, which Trevor Blackwell started, Ugobi, and it was just working with these cool entrepreneurs who were taking this sort of layer of the robot and robotics and figuring out how it could be in people's homes in a way, it's same era as Roomba, right? In a way where it really felt like it was a part of what mattered to the family's life. So I think for us, that was a lot of the impact.
You mentioned some of your business development efforts were hosting events, right? And showing that you were fun to work with and that you were also knowledgeable and going to kill it. And then you were talking about, the entrepreneurs themselves and saying, okay, well, I want to work with that person. So were you guys doing prospecting and then trying to get those people to your events? Like, how did you market those events and get people there?
Yeah, so we were doing prospecting, and a lot of that prospecting was sort of friends of friends or people in the network, or we would go out and say, okay, we're working, we're going to go to speak at a VC fund, and then we're going to look through their portfolio and figure out who seems most interesting to us that we would want to work with beyond sort of that session. Who would we want to try to actually engage with? And then leads would come our way, people would be referred our way, and we would kind of have those get to know you conversations. Or are they a fit for us, work wise and personality wise? Are we going to be able to really do the best work together because of that? Because I think that makes all the cylinders work, at a much higher level. And then you asked about the events. Yes, we absolutely were inviting prospects, current clients, former clients, people we had turned down who we decided we weren't a fit to work with, and we had referred them out to other people. We invited other agencies and PR people, obviously a lot of journalists, so I think it really was a broad swath of people. It was just who was going to be fun and make that room really interesting. And that to me was always the best compliment, when we would hear from someone and say, it was just such an interesting, eclectic group of people. Like, it's not the people that I expected, because they're always at the same dinners with the same usual suspects of people they expect. And we were able to kind of give everybody there an experience that felt different.
So sounds like these events are pretty big.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely different ones. So we did a series with the guys at MobClicks that we called Dom and Digital, or Bubbly and Banter. We changed the name multiple times, but it was essentially like, let's get to have together and have an interesting conversation. At first, we thought we would do it, topically, and then I think one of the journalists was like, "Can't we just drink Macallan? Do we have to talk about monetization while we drink it? Can't we just talk about whatever?" And we were like, "Yeah, you're right." So we would bring, a different, interesting. It was either like it was Macallan night, or it was Dom Perignon night, or whatever. People could obviously not drink or drink whatever they wanted, but something like that. And then, interesting dinners. And then we did an event at our office called Hacks versus Flacks. And that one was just PR people and journalists. And we brought in large games. I wish somebody would take this over and do this now. It was so fun. But we would bring like whack-a-mole, skee ball, like huge Jenga. We had Mario Kart on like before the Nintendo Switch, but we had different games all throughout the office. And when everybody walked in, we would give them branded poker chips. And we would say at the end of the night, before you leave, put your chips in either the Hacks box or the Flax box and bet as you want. But whoever wins, whatever team wins, gets bragging rights and a trophy.
So much fun. So
It was really fun.
you guys were sponsoring these events?
That's right. I mean, we were sponsoring some and we were putting on some for others. So like the Dom and Digital Bubbly and Banter, the Mobflix guys sponsored and we put on. Hacks versus Flax, we did all ourselves. We created a conference called Glimpse that was about the future of social discovery. And we worked with the folks at Tagged as a lead sponsor of that. But that one was, like panels on stage, and we would get interesting people together to talk about social and especially sort of discovering things online. And that was before it was even as big as it was. And those were really great conferences. We could get a friend from the New York Times to moderate. And then suddenly the person from Facebook who you want to speak on the panel writes you back when you say it's a New York Times moderated panel. So, to different levels, we put them all on. And in some cases, people paid us for them or gave us money to make them happen. And at other times, it was just us.
Wow, very cool. How big did your agency get before you sold it?
We were about 20 people when we sold.
Wow. And so what was the biggest key in your mind from being a successful fractional CMO in addition to building the agency? And I really want to think about it from what enabled you to grow consistently over that period of time in new client acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, I guess during the agency time frame, it was all about growth. Now I'm actually in a position where I'm like, I actually want to go the other direction where I want to be smart and strategic and do less. So that's kind of a different sales prospecting position to be in, I guess, right? And you have to take things a little bit differently. You don't spend quite as much of your time chasing things. But during the Inner Circle Labs days, I had this sort of, I want to keep some availability with the team in terms of their time so that if a really awesome project comes in, we can take that. And I remember my mentor said to me, well, that's your profit margin, Julie. So do you not want to make any money? And I was like, oh, well, that's really, really smart. So having good mentors around you who can sort of check you on your stuff is really helpful. So to that end, it was always about sort of pushing the realms of what we could all do with our time without burning out and being really smart and strategic about having our fingers out there to try sort of hire the next person so that we could grow the team. Because, as you grow the business, you've got to grow the team. And for us, because we were working with startups, there was naturally more turnover, right? Like the more successful we were, the more likely that company was to be acquired and therefore probably not work with us much after that, or even exist at all, get submerged into Microsoft or CNN or many other examples. So yeah, it was about keeping the floodgates always open, right? And I think that's something that fractionals have a lot of fear around, is that like if you take a break for whatever reason, for family, for health, or you just have enough work, I think we all have this concern that we're not going to be able to turn that spigot back on again, or it's going to be really hard to turn it back on again. So I think when you're in that constant growth mode, you have to always be prospecting and finding new business, even if you actually don't have the capacity to make it happen yet.
So
People like that, right? They'd rather be like, I'm too busy, I can work with you in a month, than like, I've got all the time in the world. That's actually somebody to maybe avoid.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's say I'm a fractional COO and you're giving advice for my plate is full and it feels like I have no time for business development, but you just said the most important thing is to keep it going. So if I have 2 hours a week, what should I be doing in those 2 hours to maintain business development efforts, lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah, for me, a lot of people have a lot of success with becoming like a brand on LinkedIn, and they've got all their hashtags of the things they talk about, and they're posting there. That has never really been my thing. It's so funny, right? The shoemaker's children have no shoes. Like I have a communications background, and I'm like, call me if you want to talk, but I'm not going to post anything there. So for me, I would spend that 2 hours. I would probably spend 30 minutes of it with a spreadsheet that I would create that would be all the different people in my network who could potentially be helpful. And then another tab that is all the prospects of companies, probably I would try to keep that list to 20 or 30 that I would really like to work with at some point and that I think there's a fit for. And that for me would be like populated by Mylance, right? Those are the kinds of things I would put there. And then I would spend the other 90 minutes pinging those and like the prospects and the people I know with just hey, do you have time for a chat? Whatever it might be. and being strategic, because suddenly if everybody gets back to you and says, yes, I can chat, it's not ideal. So some of them would be, do you have time to catch up and chat? Some would be, I've been thinking of you. I saw this thing your company did. That's so cool. How was that? Like maybe just keeping it to an email back and forth, but just staying on the radar of those people. And with the prospects, I think I would probably do similar vibe, but also like anything that's happening that I can help you with. Do you want to hop on the phone for 15 minutes and gut check anything? So you're not sort of selling, you're not sort of saying in that case, I have a fractional COO, let's work together. But what you're more saying, like any hurdles happening right now that it might be useful for you for me to weigh in on. And that's how I would spend my time.
And so that's a question we get a lot is my plate is full. I'm supposed to be networking with these people, but I actually don't have a spot on my roster right now. So I hear the keep it to an email back and forth. I was thinking of you, saw this article, maybe, okay. What if I am asking for a call? What am I doing on that call as a fractional that has my plate full?
I think it is sort of similar to like, what are you working on? What's been hard for you? You know, I've always enjoyed our conversations. I wanted to check in and see if I could help. Maybe you have a question or two you want to ask them that would be helpful to you. So it feels like a back and forth, but it doesn't feel like a call where you're selling them, asking them just strictly to help you. It's sort of that sort of, how are things in your world? What might I be useful for you on? Are there any connections that you're looking for? Maybe I know someone I could introduce if there's a certain company you guys are trying to work with or partner with, or is there anybody in my network if you're looking to hire? Could I help you? You know, oh, I see you've got this job description for a entry level ops person. I've got some thoughts on how you might make that stronger. So just looking for ways that you can provide a benefit to them. And then if at the end of that call they say, hey, you know, I really think we should work together. I have some project coming up in 3 months or whatever. Then you start to think about how you can make that work within your roster in the future. Or if you're really if they say, I need you right now, you could say, I don't have time right now, but let's figure out, you know, something in a month or something like that, right? And you can always push yourself and stretch yourself. If you really truly are at your max, then you know, maybe you don't spend 2 full hours a week, maybe you just spend half an hour a week. But if you're trying to grow your business and hire more people and potentially become an agency, then you have to be doing more of that than if it's just, like you said, an unscalable individual.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. What was selling the agency like?
It was very different for me than most people because I really wanted to get out to Santa Fe and take that CMO job. So I moved much more quickly and I worked to focus on friends who owned agencies who I knew that could potentially be a good home for my team and for the clients. My mentor helped a lot. The person who was running ops, my co-founder, helped a lot. And we really just quickly got to, okay, what is the asset worth? How do we value these different things? What does the tail of the deal look like since I'm not staying on and I'm not doing a buyout period? But you know, I think my advice to folks there is do it the right way. Don't do it the way I did it. Take more time and do it. You know, if you've built an asset over 10 years like that, really take the time to do the buyout period if you at all can. But you know, who am I? You know, who am I to talk? Given I didn't do it that way. And bring in experts who know, like be willing to pay folks to help you who have been there before and who can make sure that the terms are fair and that you're not getting into a position, especially with a buyout where it looks to you on paper like it could be super lucrative, but truly there's also like 15 ways that the parent company could screw you. You got to watch for that kind of stuff.
And just for people that might be less familiar with buyouts, right? You're talking about the longer tail of the deal could be worth, let's just say a round number, $10 million, and
Yep.
some of it could be paid out after the sale in a rev share, basically, right?
Yeah.
That's where
Yeah, so let's say using that hypothetical 10 million, maybe you're given, you know, 2.5 million or 3 million up front, and the rest of it you earn over the next 3 to 5 years. And they would set targets and goals for you of like, we no more than 20% of the team should turn over per year. So you're focused on retaining a team of people who now are like, I don't really want to work for this big agency and it feels less personal. Or no more new business goals, retaining current client goals, right? So all of those things could be built in a way that looks doable to you because you're looking in your rearview mirror about what you've done in the past when you were kind of running your own thing. Well, now you're going to be under the guise of this bigger company. That's a different brand. There's, you know, you convince them to keep your own brand, but again, finding somebody who can help you negotiate those terms so that you're not looking at a $10 million check in your mind and really you end up, getting four.
Yeah. Thanks for giving that overview. One
Yeah.
last topic I want to hit on quickly before we end is imposter thoughts. And we all have them. And sometimes the more successful we are, sometimes we have even more of them. And then I've heard from so many women in our community that that's such it may be more difficult thing as a woman in the workplace. Would love to hear your experience with that, especially as you really end up building up this company, but just along the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has those thoughts. I think men are probably better at hiding them than women. I think women have more of this. Maybe we've been trained, and hopefully not the next generation, but my generation, I think, and even the one below me, hopefully my kid, et cetera. Those guys won't be like this. But I think we've all been trained that it's sort of gauche to talk about money or to ask about money, or you shouldn't feel like you're asking for more than the consultant next to you or whatever. And I think we really have to push past that and focus on what we're worth. When it comes to imposter syndrome, I was talking to somebody literally a couple hours ago who has worked at the biggest companies in the world. And she commented on her career and said, I think it's a little one dimensional. And I said, wow, it's funny because I would look at my career and say it's one dimensional in that I've been very focused on startups. So maybe a bigger company wouldn't be as attracted to me. And I always think maybe I should go out and get a job at one of these sort of, Fortune 50 companies so that I can really prove that I can do that too. And on the other side, she's having these thoughts of like, I haven't worked with enough startups. So I think no matter what you do, no matter how varied, I've had a very varied career. I talk to other people who have really sat and dug one hole and dug it very deeply. And I look back and I've dug 50 little holes and been like, oh, look, there's a hole, there's a hole. So no matter what you do, you're going to feel like you maybe chose the wrong path or you missed something. I think it's about having conversations with people, really putting out there what you would do, what you think about their business. And if they don't like what you're saying, then you shouldn't be working with them anyway. So let that be the guide of like, push yourself out there. Don't worry about it. You're doing great, really. I mean, if you sit and think and look back at your life and all that you've accomplished, everybody will realize you've done a lot for what you're doing. Everybody who listens to this podcast, I'm sure, is probably of that ilk. And it is natural to be worried. And just in the same vein of finding mentors who will push you on the hard questions, find mentors who will remind you how awesome you are as well, and then find a way to push past those thoughts.
Was there a specific time that you struggled with this and like did something to overcome it, but you're just like, oh, I just don't know if I'm good enough or if I can do this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of like every day, like not every day, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's not an uncommon feeling, I think,
Yeah.
in business to say, hey, maybe this is one step too far. Like recently, I went with a company I was working with to a trade show in Vegas, and that's not really been my thing for years. There's always been sort of younger, newer people who want to run around and make the parties happen. Or I've had a team of people with me, and I was like, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. Like I maybe I don't have it. I was a little nervous. And I just said, okay, it's like riding a bike. Like figure out the things that you did that mattered most. What were the things that you did that mattered most to make that successful when you were 25? Now go out and replicate those things with the intelligence and the ability and the impact of a 40 something. And it was great. And it was really, really good. And there were multiple compliments of like, oh, you're so good at this and it's so amazing. And I was like, all right, I still got it. So I think sometimes it's just being ready to dive into the pool and take the risk. And what's the worst that happens? Try always thinking through like, what's the worst that happens? I lose this account, I'll find somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just love normalizing that kind of ongoing, relatively everyday feeling of I'm just not quite sure. And that's okay. And I'm going to go do it anyway. And as you said, what's the worst that happens? But so many people are held back by that emotion. And that's what I want to just normalize. Like everyone's got it.
Totally. And I would say more so now than ever because of COVID, right? We are dealing with more mental health issues and anxiety across the board from children to the elderly. So for us to assume that it is just about our work stuff, right? It's showing up in our work stuff, but it's normal for everybody to feel this way. So meditate extra, get a therapist, when you feel like you're uncomfortable in your body, lay down and stretch a little bit, but know that you've got what it takes to get a lot of good things done. And if the thing that you're doing isn't the thing that you should be doing, then understand the signs and move on.
Love it. Julie, what is one thing you want to leave our audience with? Anything from your last 20 years that you think would be helpful to share?
Yeah, okay. There's so many things. I think my biggest one would be uh, you can write your own story and it can change chapter to chapter as much as you need it to. But I would encourage that sitting down and writing up what you want for your life and what you want it to look like, especially if you're doing fractional work and you have that option, right? So is it 25% taking care of your family and you've got an aging parent that you're dealing with, right? Is it 25% health and wellness and exercise and mental health and all of these things? Figuring out what that looks like for you. And you probably don't want it to be minutia level, like, 10% this, 10% that. But what are your big chunks for the next year or the next 6 months? And then time yourself on them. So use your calendar, set different colors to be different categories. And then at the end of each month or quarter, pull out a spreadsheet and see how you did. Did you actually give 25% to your own health and wellness? Or did you, just do a ton of new business that led nowhere, that's only stressed you out? So, just looking back at that stuff and tracking yourself and having some personal goals, so that you can write your own story, I think is really important.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Julie. One thing that I hear a lot is, oh, it's so important to me that I write this book, for example. And then I was like, okay, well, when do you spend time writing the book? And it's like, oh, I just do it in the spare minutes after work, right before I have to eat dinner, or like Sunday after. And it's like, well, you're not exactly prioritizing what you're telling me is the most important thing to you, right? So there can be a
Yeah.
disconnect there.
Yeah, and you can have an intense month. Like this month, I did not do what I said I would do for the year. What I said in December to do. I worked a lot more than I planned to. But as long as I look at that and say, okay, I front loaded my work for Q1. Now in February and March, I'm going to work less and I'm going to write more and work on that book or whatever the thing might be for you. Find yourself that ability, because it's not going to be. There's always going to be something that's going to get in your way and push stuff off. Just don't let it happen forever.
Yeah. Amazing, Julie. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all your knowledge with the audience. It's been amazing to have you.
Thank you, Bradley. And I'm stoked on Mylance, and I'm happy for you, and congrats on everything you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. We'll talk again soon.
All right, sounds good. Talk to you soon.